I don't understand how it's possible that Iran has the capabilities to fight this way and continue to try to lash out at Gulf countries and U.S. military bases, because the U.S. has obliterated Iran's military, and the president continues to reiterate that.
As far as the public goes and how they feel about this war, it's pretty clear. A new Washington Post Ipsos poll finds that 68% of Americans believe the war in Iran was not worth fighting, compared to just 28% who are saying it was. That negative 40-point split is worse than both the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, according to Washington Post ABC News polling.
Welcome back to the channel. The discussion is moderated by CNN anchor Pamela Brown, who prompts the panel by asking if the war's plummeting approval ratings are purely an economic issue, pointing directly to the sting of high gas prices. Panelist Steve jumps in to acknowledge the wallet damage, noting that after enjoying historic low prices, no one likes seeing gas surge past $4 a gallon and food costs climb. However, Steve notes that public judgment really hinges on whether the core mission was accomplished. If Iran's nuclear capabilities are truly neutralized, people might call it worth it. If not, the price tag feels impossible to justify. Panelist Christine expands on the broader frustration, pointing out to Pamela that while $4 gas and $5 diesel hit families directly, the real issue is a complete lack of a clear strategy. She notes that every time the White House declares a total victory, reality quickly contradicts it. Joining the critique, Keith highlights the severe transparency gap, calling out how the public is finding out about dozens of injured U.S. service members from journalists rather than official briefings. Ultimately, while Steve highlights the pain at the pump and Elizabeth defends the administration's resolve to eliminate threats, the general consensus on Pamela's panel is clear. Americans aren't just reacting to expensive gas. They are exhausted by contradictory claims, shifting goals, and a conflict that feels suspiciously like a sequel nobody asked for. Let's jump back to the video.
Given that we do appear to be in full-scale fighting again, I wanted to know, how do Americans feel about it this time around versus where they were at the beginning?
Yeah, historically unpopular. That's the phrase that I would use. The war was unpopular to start off with, and it's become even less popular. You could see it right here. Okay, Washington Post poll, Trump's Iran war net approval rating. In early March, look at this. It was way down there at minus 13 points. Very rare for a war to start off underwater on the net approval. That is approval minus disapproval. But look at how far down we are now, right into the Red Sea. 40 points underwater, according to the Washington Post poll. Look, I tried to find every single poll I possibly could. I believe this minus 40 points represents the least popular poll in terms of Trump's net approval rating on the Iran war, the entire war so far. So as I said at the beginning, it started off unpopular, and now it is even more unpopular, historically unpopular, 40 points underwater.
Well, since you're talking about history, put this in some historical perspective.
Yeah, okay, let's put it in some historical perspective. You think the war has been worth it or not worth it? And why don't we take a look here? We can compare Iran in 2026 to Iraq in 2006. And keep in mind, the Iraq war by this point in 2006, at this point in the midterm cycle, it had been going on for 3 years at this point. We're only a few months into this war. Think the war was worth it. Iraq in 2006, 58% said it was not worth it. And again, that was 3 years into that war. Look at this now. You think that 58% was high in terms of not worth it? 68% of Americans, more than 2 in 3, say the Iran war was not worth it. Just 28%, less than a third of Americans now say the Iran war was worth it, even less than the 40% who said the Iraq war was worth it. Again, at this point, heading into the 2006 midterm cycle, of course, we remember what happened in 2006. Republicans lost both the House and the Senate. And at this point, this 28% even lower, and this 68% saying not worth it, even higher than the 58% who said this about Iraq 20 years ago. And so this is a very, very bad number for the president. I think a lot of Republicans in Congress don't like this number one iota.
No, look, this is a notable difference. This was a devastating year for Republicans in the midterms there. And I'm really surprised, frankly, that the disapproval is that much higher at this point. All right, who are these people? What is the partisan makeup of people saying that they don't think the Iran war is worth it?
Yeah, the 68% not worth it, just a devastating number for Republicans. What is driving this number? Well, it's two groups that I think are just really interesting. Say the Iran war is not worth it. Look at this. Among all independents, it is 77%. More than 3 in 4 of all independents say it's not worth it. How about GOP-leaning independents? These are independents who say they actually lean Republican. 63% of them, more than 3 in 5, nearly 2 in 3, say that, in fact, the Iran war is not worth it. Again, as I said at the beginning, this is a historically unpopular war. It's a war that is becoming only more unpopular. And while President Trump won't be on the ballot come November, a lot of Republicans in Congress will be, and they cannot like the look of these numbers, especially with a group of GOP-leaning independents who historically vote Republican.
They need these voters.
They need these voters. They need these voters. They need these voters. And right now in the Iran war, they most certainly don't have these voters.
Well, welcome to the polling charts, where the approval numbers are diving deeper than a submarine. Sitting at minus 40 points isn't just underwater. That's practically hanging out in the Marianas Trench. When a war starts off at minus 13 and manages to sink down to minus 40, you know you've achieved a very rare kind of political history. Even 3 out of 4 independents and a massive chunk of GOP-leaning voters are looking at these charts like, yeah, no thanks, we're good. Turns out when you promise a quick victory and end up with skyrocketing gas prices and a war that's currently less popular than a surprise tax audit on a Monday morning, the public is quick to let you know. Let's continue watching.
I don't understand how it's possible that Iran has the capabilities to fight this way and continue to try to lash out at Gulf countries and U.S. military bases, because the U.S. has obliterated Iran's military, and the president continues to reiterate that.
As far as the public goes and how they feel about this war, it's pretty clear. A new Washington Post Ipsos poll finds that 68% of Americans believe the war in Iran was not worth fighting, compared to just 28% who are saying it was. That negative 40-point split is worse than both the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, according to Washington Post ABC News polling. Maria Bartiromo, who is very friendly generally towards Donald Trump, contending with this idea that at one point in this war, people were told, look, we obliterated their Navy, we took out most of their military capabilities, and yet you're seeing service members die, and you're seeing them being able to lash out at places like Jordan in the region. How do you respond?
Look, I think first and foremost, we have to say that all of us here agree that this loss is horrific, right? U.S. loss like this is awful. We all mourn these lives. We all know that they're doing the impossible. They're signing up for something none of us could probably fathom. I know it's hard enough for me to sit here with you all compared to, what they sign up to do. These are American heroes. And I think we're all sitting here wondering what this means moving forward. I believe the president when he says that they're going to strike them now 10 times harder than they could have otherwise. I believe that he means business. He always has. But when you take American blood like this, there's really no other response. I think the entire country agrees with Maria. Maria's a friend. I know that when she looks at this, she wants to know that Iran is actually obliterated in the way that they can never react like this ever again. They never have this capability. But for them, it doesn't mean that their Navy wasn't, for a fact, obliterated. It means they're using every last missile that they have to try and, bring up American pain. That's what they do. It does not mean we're not stronger than them. It doesn't mean we shouldn't celebrate American victories. It means that this war is going to go on, which I think is unfortunate. It means we have a real task on our hand to either get a deal in place that's better than Obama's deal or obliterate the Iranian regime once and for all. And I would hope that we can all be united in that.
We've officially crossed from the land of tidy political graphics and charts directly into the murky realm of, wait, what are we actually doing here? The panel kicks off this segment by addressing the elephant in the room. Maria Bartiromo, usually one of the administration's biggest cheerleaders, is sitting there genuinely puzzled, asking the million-dollar question. Wait a minute, didn't we tell everyone we completely obliterated their military? Because on paper, according to official declarations, the opposition's navy was sunk, their forces were wiped out, and everything was supposed to be wrapped up with a nice bow. Yet somehow, despite being obliterated, they're still firing off missiles and causing serious casualties. That's a unique kind of obliterated, the kind where the other side clearly didn't get the memo. Then Elizabeth steps up to defend the strategy, offering what can only be described as Olympic-level mental gymnastics. Her take? Well, sure, they might be firing missiles, but that's just them using up their very last missiles to inflict pain. It's the political equivalent of saying, don't worry, folks, he's totally out of breath, he can only punch us a few dozen more times. She insists that we should still celebrate victories, even as the war drags on endlessly, because the real end goal is either a deal better than Obama's or total, absolute regime change. No pressure, right? Then Christine jumps into the fray to throw cold water on the whole setup. She points out that the public's patience hasn't just run out, it's skipped the queue and left the building entirely. Why? Because people are looking at gas hitting $4 and $5 a gallon, hearing about soldiers being injured, and realizing the grand strategic plan seems to change every Tuesday. One week the goal is no forever wars, the next week it's unconditional surrender, and by the end of the month everyone's paying $5 for diesel while the administration tries to figure out who's in charge over there. Steve tries to play the neutral ref, basically saying, hey, let's not judge just yet. If we destroyed their nuclear program, it's all worth it. To which the rest of the panel politely looks at him like, Steve, buddy, we don't even know if that actually happened. By the time Keith chimed in to point out that the administration reportedly hid the fact that nearly 100 troops were injured over the last 2 weeks, leaving news reporters to break the story instead of official briefings, the collective sigh in the studio was practically audible. Nothing builds public trust quite like a strategy that relies on trust us we won, while the gas pump counter just keeps spinning.
Steve, when you look at this, how much of what you see in the polling and just the feeling of Americans that this isn't worth it has to do with the economy, has to do with the direct effects to their lives?
Nobody likes paying $4 a gallon for gasoline. And remember, we had the lowest gasoline prices in 50 years back in January and February. So clearly that's part of this. And food prices, too, have been affected. You know, if you had asked me that question, that poll question that Americans were asked, my answer would be predicated on whether we've taken out their nuclear capability. And if we have, and I don't know what the truth is, but if we have, then I would say it's worth it. But if we haven't, then it's hard to see what we've achieved here. So I think it's sort of premature to judge this yet because, look, the impact of taking out their nuclear capability is massive for civilization.
Keith, when you look at this, is it possible that all of this in the end will actually end up hurting Iran because other nations are being attacked by them that's sort of in the region, and they're looking at other ways to try and get oil to people without going through the strait? So ultimately, in I don't know how many years' time, do you see this as being an ultimate downfall, if you will, for Iran and its whole
region? It's already hurting Iran, but it's hurting the United States too, and that's the problem. I mean, you can't bomb somebody for months and months and expect it to have no impact on them. It did have an impact on Iran, but it didn't have the desired impact. President Trump said he wanted to have regime change, or he wanted to have unconditional surrender. He was going to help the people of Iran. He was going to obliterate their nuclear program, which he already said he did last year, which he didn't. And we're going to create a better deal that was better than Obama's deal. And they created a ceasefire agreement that was worse than Obama's deal and paid him off. And so the American people are understandably frustrated because we've been through this before. We've seen this movie before. We saw it in Iraq. We saw it in Afghanistan. And we don't want to see it again. And the president isn't being transparent. So I agree with Stephen about the idea that we need the president and the administration to be transparent, because right now we have 17 U.S. service members who have been killed. But the new reporting is that nearly 100, or was it 100 service members have been injured in the past 2 weeks. And we're just now learning about it today because reporters are telling us that, not the government. That's a problem.
Do you think that we're in a scenario where we're in a quagmire now, where we can't find a solution and it's just tit for tat, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth?
Well, I think when you have a conflict like this that's gone on for 47 years, you know the solution. The solution is to obliterate a regime that wants the death of all American lives. That's the only solution, or a deal that's put in place that makes sure that future American generations never have to worry about a nuclear Iran. You brought up that polling. I don't know if that's fair to compare conflicts, considering Americans have a bad taste in their mouth. Maybe, they should, considering we had a 20-year conflict that we were in. They don't want to see that happen. Again, I'm more curious to see what polling looks like after this conflict is behind us, knowing that it was taken care of in a much less time, hopefully a stronger fashion, and again, made sure that Americans were safe for generations to come.
Christine, I do want to ask you about this, because one of the things you're pointing to, comparing it to other wars, and I think one of the things that Americans learned as they watched these wars go on and on and on and on is that they didn't feel in the end that they were worth it. They were worth the lives of those soldiers, the pain of the families, and the ultimate result. I mean, the Taliban is now in charge of Afghanistan. After 20 years. So their taste for war is low. But the president himself had promised no more forever wars. And I think a lot of people looked at that, and that may be reflected in those numbers. How do you see it, Christine?
An interesting fact in these polls, the support for this war has plummeted very quickly, as opposed to Iraq and Afghanistan, where it took much longer for people to lose faith and lose support in the war. I think people really see that the president went in without a clear plan, when he did then articulate a plan, one thing was regime change. We now have a leader who is more committed to killing Americans than the prior supreme leader. Two, it was to, obliterate their nuclear capability, which we had said we had done, but then didn't do, and to, obliterate their military capacity, which clearly we haven't done if soldiers are continuing to die at the hands of the Iranians. I think people are so quickly dissatisfied because they know we didn't go in with a plan, we shouldn't have gone in, and going in without a plan means you don't really have a plan to get out. And in addition to the impacts you articulated, it's also having an impact on the American economy, with gas being back up to $4 and more in some places, and diesel being back to $5. So people are feeling hit, and Americans are willing to sacrifice for the good of the country and the good of the world. And no one wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon, but their sacrifices, I think the polls show, they feel are for naught, because there really isn't a plan. And every time the president says we've had a victory, it turns out not to be true.
By the time the segment arrives at this point, the panel lands squarely on the single question every American administration dreads hearing. Is this becoming another forever war? The host frames the nightmare scenario, asking whether the country is stuck in a hopeless quagmire where both sides just trade blows back and forth with no exit strategy in sight. The panel's responses illustrate the deep national divide over how to define success. On one side, Elizabeth argues that after decades of tension, the only real victory is total elimination of the threat or a bulletproof deal. From this perspective, high short-term costs are justified if they prevent a nuclear-armed opponent down the road. On the other side, Christine points out how rapidly public support has collapsed compared to past conflicts like Iraq or Afghanistan. Americans were promised no more forever wars, yet they are watching a war with shifting justifications unfold, all while feeling the sting of rising gas and food prices at home. Adding a reality check, Keith highlights the core issue driving public frustration, a fundamental lack of clarity. When official claims of military victory collide with news reports of ongoing casualties and escalating economic costs, voters feel like they've seen this script before and know how it ends. Ultimately, this section captures a country wrestling with its past military missteps, torn between the impulse to project decisive strength and the stark reality of getting bogged down in an endless conflict. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more commentary and analysis.